Hello and welcome to episode 494 of the Haskincast podcast. I'm your host, Scott Haskin, here with a fantastic guest who is returning all the way from season 2, episode 29, with the second book in his amazing series. I have been so honored to be a beta reader on this. My buddy, Scott Ladzinski. Scott, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm so excited to have you back on the show. I can't believe it's been like 7 years.
Yeah, thanks, man. I
That's
appreciate
like
it.
3 apartments ago.
Yeah. For me, just one house.
One house. Exactly. Well, and I have to say, as we're recording today, yesterday was the release of the book and your 30th anniversary to an old high school chum of mine. And I'm so happy that you guys are together and still together and happy.
Thanks. Yeah, we are definitely happy, and it's been a privilege to be married to her. She is the most amazing person I know, frankly.
Well, personally, I think you both could do better. But anyway.
Yeah, well, that's probably
not at all.
She definitely could.
No, you know what? What I love is that you guys are just both really sweet, big-hearted people. And I think that just that combination of people getting together alone is such a solid foundation, because that is the core of a person. And you two finding each other and connecting, I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel very blessed to be married to her. We met our senior year, and it never stopped, and it's amazing. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey with her.
That's awesome.
So,
That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Well,
Thanks.
let's talk about your book. This is the second book in the series, The Scar of Aimsire. God damn it. I knew I was going to do that.
It's all good, man.
This happens every single time. I'm like, I have my guest. If I don't know how to pronounce their name, I'm like, let me just verify I have this right. And then we start the show and I introduce them completely wrong. I don't know why. It's now like part of the show. So Aimsire is the Aimsire, yes, is The Scar of Aimsire. The original book was The Twins of Aimsire, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for trusting me with the ability to read this book and give you some feedback and just say, hey, I like this, or I'm confused by this, especially because fantasy is not really my genre for reading. So you trusting me to even check it out and give you my thoughts at all is a real honor. I don't have words to thank you enough for that.
Well, I would reciprocate. Thank you for taking all the time you did to do so. One of the things about this entire project has always been that my job is a creative job. I'm a designer for my career, but this is sort of the thing I can do that nobody else can have access to unless I allow them access to it. Because every day of my job, I'm working for other people, like for their creative vision. And this is my creative vision. And I've actually had people ask me if they want if I want their criticism, and I say no, thank you. But what I love about you, and I think I actually said this during the first time I was on your show, is what I love and appreciate about you, Scott, is you are one of the most prolific artists that I've ever known, and you've got your hands in so many things, and you just keep going and going and going. And so it was an honor to have you, and I know that you've already said that you would continue to help me, because I'm now writing book 3. And I'm looking forward to sharing those chapters with you as they unfold.
I can't wait, because this book was, I mean, the thing I like about these books is that they're very investable. So like right off the bat, you start caring about the characters, and whether they're a good person or a bad person, you want to know what happens to them. I feel like in a lot of the entertainment that I've experienced, you have your necessary evils, your antagonists, and I don't care what happens to them. Yes, I want them to lose, but I know that they're probably going to, and I just don't invest in their story. But with these characters, good or bad, I'm following everybody, and I want to know what happens to everybody.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's a fantastic compliment, and I appreciate that. I do try to find depth in the characters. I don't want people to I mean, I want them to hate the bad people, but I also want them to love the bad people
Mhm.
and like feel empathy if they die. Like not all the bad people die.
Right.
Like that's just like real life, you know.
Mhm.
Um and not to I'm trying not to do any spoilers, but you know, sometimes characters have to die in order for
Sure.
the story to progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes a character has to die for another character
Mhm.
for their journey to continue. And I'm not going George R. R. Martin,
Mhm.
who I deeply respect as a writer. He's amazing. Um, you know, he's known for just killing characters like crazy, which is that's his writing style, and that's great. But I have always wanted the death of a character to mean something,
Mhm.
either to the story or to another character.
Right.
And so yeah, I appreciate that what you said because um I've definitely wanted people to resonate with every character, whomever they are,
Right.
in the context of the story. So yeah.
And that's it. And I'll tell you, some of my favorite television shows are ones where they do have a little bit larger of a cast, where they can just swipe main characters out without you even realizing it's about to happen. The next thing you know, boom, they are gone.
Yeah.
And I love that because it means that every episode or most episodes of a show are going to have, it's like stakes. There's stakes in every one. You watch a sitcom and it's like, okay, whatever happens, they're all going to be happy and hugging at the end. So it's really no big deal what the conflict is. But with these kind of shows and books that are willing to take those risks, every page, there's like anything could happen, and you can never be too comfortable as a reader investing in the story because anything could happen at any time. And I
Right.
love that because if it's just something that, I mean, every once in a while it's nice to just read a nice story. But if I'm
Sure.
going to read it, I want it to be exciting. I want it to be dramatic. I want to be on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen next. And pacing has a lot to do with that. And I have to say the
Mm-hmm.
pacing of both of these books is is exactly what I look for.
Cool.
You give enough to really get a vivid understanding of what's happening in the book, but not so much where I'm like, all right, can we just get on with this?
Right.
You
Sure.
found that balance that I think is so
Oh,
key to not mentally checking out. And in today's world of short attention spans, you've got to have that.
yeah, I appreciate that observation because one of the things I try to do is balance character development with action sequences that will, because it's sort of like, so my entire history as a reader is, as a kid growing up in the 80s, is comic books. That's what we had. And then I discovered The Hobbit. Um, that was the first book I actually read because I wasn't
Wow.
interested in reading. And in early middle school, I had a teacher recommend The Hobbit to me. And it was the first book I read and was really in the place where I said, this is like the kind of books I want to read. And then that just, led into the entire Dragonlance series and, of course, Lord of the Rings, which is sort of a
Right.
staple for fantasy readers. And then later in life, I started discovering the Wheel of Time. And then, of course, when the Song of Ice and Fire came out and all that, I found myself really consuming fantasy. And what I noticed is with fantasy, you really have to you have to develop characters, but then you have to pace in the action, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like people want to see orcs getting their heads cut off, or bad people attacking the good people, or it's always a battle of good and evil. Um, and I wanted that element in my story. And so yeah, it's really trying to find that balance of, because as you've probably noticed as one of my two beta readers, um I really want the characters to mean something to people,
Yeah.
and so you have to take time to do that. And that's what I've really tried to I honestly I focus on that a little more than the action.
Mhm.
But I do try to get enough action in there to make sure that people stay interested in all the light and fire that is getting cast around as
Right.
people get blown up.
Well,
So
let me give you kind of a reference of what it's like to read your book from my perspective.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to read a chapter and then I'll make
Oh,
dinner.
okay.
Okay, I got to read another chapter. Then I'll make dinner. All right, one more. Oh God. Okay, well now I have to know what happens next. I'll just read the beginning
Aw.
of the next one to figure out what happens. Next thing I know, I'm like 10 chapters in and I'm like, I'm starving and
Aw.
about to pass out. So that to me is engaging. And I mean and it's tough because while I'm being a beta reader, I'm also stopping to make notes but still enjoying the story.
Yeah.
And it's a weird position to be in because I'm not reading it as a casual reader, but what happens is you suck me into the story or to what's going on with a specific character, and I end up having to read a lot of it twice because I'm just getting so engrossed in the story that I'm not paying attention to the nuances that I need to as a beta reader. That to me is a sign of great writing because
Mm.
typically I'm able to just do the job I'm supposed to do without, while appreciating the story, but not getting so sucked into it that I'm forgetting the responsibility I've committed to.
Right. Oh, well, I mean, that's a huge compliment, and I'm sorry that you missed your dinner. On
I'm okay. Don't get me wrong.
No, I
I
got
made
you.
it, but
But I just wow, thank you. I can tell you that a lot of that has to do with my mentor teaching me that every chapter needs to be its own story, but each chapter needs to end with enough of a, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but leaving the reader with enough that they want to read the next chapter.
exactly.
Yeah. So if I can name drop, Ron Fortier is my mentor. He's the editor at Airship 27, and he's written over 200 books or something. Like
Wow.
he has a huge catalog, and he is actually, if we go to the beginning of my journey as an author, he's literally the person that I have to point to as the one who really pushed me to write. Um, and if it wasn't for him, I don't know if any of this would happen. Honestly, like everybody else aside, who has been incredible in coming up with me, um, he was the one that really said, if you don't do this, you're doing an injustice to yourself. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, he has been an incredible mentor, and in both of these books, and no joke, for if I write, you know, 5 or 100 books for the rest of my life, Ron will always be in the acknowledgments because
Yeah.
he's literally the person I can point to that influenced me to even start trying to do this, because none of it is, I'm not doing this as a career. I
Right.
love
Yeah.
it. And if it turns into a career, that's fine. But it's not the goal. It's
Right.
really like I have these stories in my head and I just want to write them. And the fact that other people are enjoying them is just like a really super cool bonus. So
Yeah, it is. I mean, I mean, you've been a creator for a long time. This is your first book series, but you've been
mhm.
creating since I met you in the end of my our sophomore year of high
Yeah,
school. So
yeah,
we were 15, 16 years old. We've known
yeah.
each other that long.
hmm
And I mean, I remember the first day I met you, you were sitting there doodling at your desk, and I
Drawing
knew right
swords.
away,
I was
artist,
drawing swords.
drawing swords. Yep, artist. I'm going to
Yeah,
connect with this guy.
yeah.
So, I mean, you have the creative side to you, but there's a difference between being creative and putting it out there for public consumption. And a lot of people never find the strength to cross that line and say, okay, I'm willing for my art to be publicly consumed. Um, it's a scary thing, but what for
hmm
you was the thing that made it okay for you to go, I'm going to actually put this out instead of just writing it for my own joy?
Yeah, that you are 100% right. The scariest thing is putting it out there, for people to consume. And I don't know. To answer that question, I would say I just took a leap of faith. I mean, it was it was so scary March 18th of 2024 when Twins of Aimsire came out. I have done hundreds and hundreds, I mean, maybe even over 1,000 creative things that have hit the public sphere. But like I said earlier, all of those were somebody else's thing. And I was
Right.
just the creative designer that could help them bring their vision to life.
Mm.
But this was the one that was literally from my soul.
Yeah.
It's a story that's been bouncing around in my head for a really long time. Um, and yeah, it was scary when it came out, and you do wonder, are people going to trash me? Are people going to like it?
Mhm.
I think some of being a designer, though, you do start to get a little bit of like duck feathers, where you can let some water roll off your back and it doesn't
Sure.
bother you, but it still does. I mean, you can say that, it's beautiful words, beautiful prose, but in the end, it's like, yeah, it does hit you because when you're an artist and you put some, and you know this as much as anybody because you're so prolific in what you do.
Thank you.
Um, if you put something out there and somebody writes something terrible about it, it hits you in the heart.
It does. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there's
And so,
certain, I think there's a certain level of what's reasonable feedback and what isn't reasonable feedback. And I
and
talked a lot
that's,
about this on various
yeah,
podcasts I've done where if you have something that's constructive, like I'm having a hard time, when you talk about this, you get really quiet, or, there's fuzz in the mic, or the volume to music ratio isn't right, or whatever, that's constructive feedback. If you're just like, oh, like a show, man,
yeah, yeah,
and you're going to get people that are like, I just didn't like the book, it's not my taste. That has nothing to do with your writing. It has to do
yeah,
with the fact that they were looking for something that the book was not.
right.
So you can go back to, okay, did I describe it well enough that would have led them to a reasonable conclusion and they just didn't? Or do I just say, you know what, they just didn't care, they read it with their own expectations, and it's not my fault that I didn't meet them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is that feedback from people you don't know is something that artists and creatives should be willing to just let it go.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that's so much easier said than done. But it's something that when you've done it for a while, you just kind of learn to accept. And even it's it's kind of funny because if you go to, obviously my book is on Amazon,
Mhm.
and because it's self-published, and if you go look at the feedback on Twins of Aimsire, like the reviews, there's a review up there that is clearly fake.
Mhm.
And he or she, I don't know who they were, um, they're using like if I'm recalling correctly, it was something like found behind a, and then they did a dumpster emoticon,
Wow.
and then gave it a shot. Uh, you know, was where, I don't know. I can't remember it off the top of my head,
Mhm.
but it was clearly a fake review, and someone was just trolling. And I gotta say, you know, I I didn't take it to heart because I knew it was fake. Um, but it was just what what stinks about that is I only had 20 reviews, and then now there's 21. It was the last review that was written, if I remember correctly, and it brought my rating down, which isn't, again, that's, it's not about the rating, but it's just like, okay, someone did that trying to be funny or
Mhm.
whatever their motivation was, and here we are. Now I'm affected for the rest of that book being on Amazon because someone was,
Well,
doing
yeah,
whatever
but
they did for whatever reason they did it.
I mean, I had the same thing happen with my first Vegas book. Somebody had said, "Well, I wanted a story." Well, it doesn't say it's a story. There's a
Right.
there's a description of what the book is. If
Right.
you didn't read that, then why are you marking me down for it?
Right.
But when I had Gabrielle Stone on the show, we were talking about that because her book had gone like right away to the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
And we were
Good for
talking
her.
about it and negative feedback and stuff because I'd read some of the reviews, and I mean it was like men were trashing it and women were like, "This is the greatest book ever,"
Mm.
and I asked her about it. She goes, "You know what? It proves that the feedback is real. Having somebody
Sure.
be pissed off about it or just bashing it or whatever. Yes, it sucks from one perspective because you don't want anyone to feel that way, but it also kind of legitimizes the fact that it's not just like your friends that all left feedback
Yeah.
and everybody's being nice and sweet.
Yeah.
Everybody gets negative feedback because we live in a very petty, I don't have anything better in my life, so I'm going to bring people down around me society.
Yeah.
That honestly, I think it actually adds legitimacy to it more so than hurts you.
I would I agree 100%. Um,
It still sucks, but
it does.
it does
But you
help.
know, it's
It's more
funny.
helpful.
You saying that reminds me, because I did used to put some of my illustrations, which I'm not great. I'll admit, I'm not a great illustrator. I
Disagree.
always, well, look, I'm comparing myself to illustrators like Zane DeGane and Claire Meath and Zach Howard, who are like
Okay,
unbelievable.
I checked out Claire on your suggestion last time we talked,
Yeah.
and yes, she is very talented. But
Oh
here's
my
the
gosh.
thing: just because I'm not Hans Zimmer does not mean I'm not a good composer, or just
No,
because
I
I'm
get
not
that.
Beethoven.
I get that. But you know,
Never compare
again,
yourself to
I
another
get that, and
artist.
I do not disagree with you. It's just one of those things where I like that was my aim for a while, was to become an illustrator, and I did recognize, hey, there's people out there that will bury me, and I won't
Sure.
get work,
Mhm.
and that's okay. Like I think it's great. Everybody has their own talents. My point and all that was that I was putting up my illustrations, and I had done a comic for a while, like an online comic, and I was getting the illustrations were what was getting the most negative feedback,
Oh
and I
wow.
was taking it personally, and I was like being like, "Meh." And the thing that I would do is I would go look at the people that were giving negative feedback. I'd go look at their profiles, and 99 times out of 100, they weren't doing anything to put themselves out there.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so I was
there are
just like,
people
okay,
that just
you're
want to
just
bash
you're
and
just negative,
yeah.
and you're just bashing people, and that's okay. I'm sorry you have to live with yourself.
Yeah.
um, so that was kind of the point of that. Is it's like I can illustrate,
Mhm.
and I do decent illustration, but I also realized like that's not where I'm going to really make a mark. And what happened was, as I started writing, and people were coming alongside of me, and they were encouraging me and telling me how good I was, and it was seasoned people that were
Mhm.
telling me this,
Right.
and that's what made me really go, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this. And you know, I'm not I'll be the first to admit, I'm not trying to be the best writer in the world. I'm just hoping that I write some stories that people like and that resonates with them and they enjoy them, right? If people
Mhm.
are going to sit down for a few hours and read your book, I just hope that they like it, you know. So,
Yeah, that's where I come from too. But I could say, two out of two so far for me have been
oh,
fantastic.
thanks.
I've highly enjoyed them, in a way, it's a little difficult as a beta reader to enjoy the book because, like I said, you're focused on so many things.
Yeah.
It's like when I do a critical song review or an album review. It's like I'm not listening as a casual fan. I'm listening
Right.
for things. I'm looking at the mix. I'm looking at lyrics. I'm looking at the blend of sounds or whatever. There's so much going on that takes my focus away from just relaxing and enjoying it. So for me
Yeah.
to be able to just get into the story like that and enjoy it does not happen very often. But I'll
Yeah.
say, I remember we were talking earlier before we started recording. We were talking about like the old days of dial-up AOL and having to go to
Yeah.
Best Buy to get your 15 hours for the week or month or whatever it was.
Right.
I remember AOL when they first had forums, when forums first became an online thing. And you would
Mm-hmm.
take your 4 minutes to dial into AOL and wait for that you got mail thing. And then you go into the forums, which takes another 5 minutes because the internet is so slow on your 300 baud modem.
Right.
And I remember my brother had posted a question about something. I don't remember what it was, but somebody wrote in and he was all excited. He saw that there was a response and it takes like 4 minutes to get to that response just for that person to say, I just want to let you know I don't know the answer.
Right.
I'm like, here
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah.
There are so many people like that out there
Yeah.
that you have to take it with a grain of salt. And the other thing
Yeah.
I'll say about it is that you don't know where the opinion comes from. Let's say they just genuinely do not like something that you create. Okay, what is it that you're used to? What is it that you're attracted to? What was your expectation when you looked at this piece or before you saw it?
Yeah.
There's so many factors that go into that. It's like if you don't like a band I like, okay, but there's a reason that you don't like them.
Yeah.
That doesn't invalidate my enjoyment of their music or of this movie or of this story or whatever.
Yeah.
But we tend to, as artists, immediately get defensive of our art, which is understandable because it's what we created and we want people to like it. but we do need to step back and go, okay, but where is this really coming from? You don't
Yeah,
even know me. What was your expectation? Did you have a bad dinner? Did somebody break up with you today? Did,
yeah,
is this just not your genre and you're mad because you spent time on it? And I mean,
right,
it could be
sure,
anything.
yeah. I agree. It's you do have to frame all the things about putting your piece of work out there, and you have to also understand that when you do put it out there, which you and I think agree that's the hardest thing you could do as an artist, but you do open yourself up to arrows.
Oh,
You know,
sure.
people are going to shoot
Hmm.
arrows at you,
Hmm.
and you just have to learn to be tough enough to just brush it off. And
Right.
that's not easy because most artists
Yeah.
work from a pool of emotion, you know,
Hmm. And
and that's
especially
just how
because
it is.
as creators, most of the time we're isolated anyway.
Yeah,
We don't have a lot of interaction, so
yeah,
it's like that becomes our interaction. When that comes back
exactly.
negative, that's a
Yeah,
hard thing to take because that's
yeah.
mostly what we get.
It feels very personal
Yeah.
when the criticism comes in, and it's really just learning that it's not personal if somebody doesn't like one thing out of maybe the thousands of things that you're going to create in your lifetime,
Yeah.
you know. And you
Exactly.
also have to understand, and you kind of referenced this earlier, you have to understand the context of where
Yeah.
that criticism is coming from. It's
Hmm.
probably my uh experience has been it's usually jealousy, um and it's also sometimes just people that are just negative in general,
Yeah.
and they're not going to say a positive thing anyway.
Hmm.
And unfortunately the internet, with the access that it is, like as beautiful of a blessing as access to information has become, it's also become the curse,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
where anybody can say anything about anything or anybody at any time. And that's a whole other podcast you and I can
Yeah.
record someday.
Well, I'll just say that my life got a lot better when I closed my account on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm on Instagram now and Facebook, but Facebook is highly limited.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't have any other social media because
Yeah.
I found myself really kind of um getting overly obsessed with, just all the ugh that's
Well, I
out
mean,
there.
most of the posts are meant to trigger a specific
Yeah,
response, and since
100%.
since there's so much, even when the political climate is not what it is right now, there's just people that want that confirmation bias of you need to believe what I believe, and I need to know that other people believe it too. So I'm just going to bully you into doing it and engage in these conversations so I can rage because that's what I need to do. I need to rage, and
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. But
And
the
the
funny thing is, I
algorithms.
went to Blue Sky because I heard that was
Mm,
like what Twitter was meant to be, where it's like really friendly and artist supportive and all that. It's the same people posting the same thing,
yeah,
you know.
of
It's
course it
it's
is.
like
Yeah.
it's any form that people have, whether it's meant for any particular type of discussion or not. They're going to turn it into that. Every social media platform will turn into a platform where artists try and share their work. Every social media platform will turn into a platform where people talk about their politics or their religious beliefs or whatever it is. Whatever the agenda is, any door that somebody can go through to share it, they will.
Yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And the algorithms feed it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you post like that you have this position on this thing, the algorithms will point you to the exact opposite.
Hmm.
And it's so sophisticated
Yeah.
that you don't even realize it's happening. And it's, it's crazy. My wife and I have discovered that. We were just talking about colleges that our son, who he's applying to master's programs right now,
Mhm.
and we were in our kitchen talking about the colleges he was thinking of applying to, and the next day we were getting advertisements for those colleges
Yeah.
on our social media.
Hmm.
And I'm
It,
going,
it
wow. I mean, just
it
wow.
happens all the time. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
have a text conversation with somebody, and then the next thing I know, I go into Instagram and I'm getting ads about something that we talked about, and it's kind of scary. I mean, it really feels like violation to me, you
Yeah.
know.
So what I've done is I've tried to say the word Aimsire everywhere I am in
There
front
you
of
go.
everybody's phone in the hopes that it'll start pulling it up in their feeds.
Aimsire, do you
That's how
say?
I fight it.
Wait, that was Aimsire? Aimsire. That's what you're saying.
Aimsire.
Aimsire. Yes. Okay.
Oh, did you
Uh,
say Aimsire?
Aimsire. Yes. Wait, wait,
You
wait.
meant the Tales of Aimsire
Okay,
when
not
you
yet, but it's going
said
to
I
happen.
want the scallopini.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about your writing process. Do you tend
Yeah.
to like lock yourself away for a certain time period, or and you just like lock in and go? Or like what is your, because for me, I feel like I can sit down almost any time and just spend like 5 minutes getting into the zone and then just go from there. Most of the time. But for you, like, but I live alone, so I can just jump into it whenever I want. You've got, obviously other people in the house, you've got responsibilities to other people. How does that affect your writing process?
Yeah. So when I started all this, Sherry and I did have both kids living here, Laurel and Ian. And I just had to make time. It's just one of those things you had to prioritize. Um, and then now we're empty nesters. Both of our kids are out of the house. And the thing, Sherry is like incredibly supportive
Mhm.
and knows this is a passion of mine. And what's also cool about, you know, being married 30 years and even 28 years, whatever, um, we can go off and do our own thing a few nights a week and nobody gets hurt about that. We both
Right.
know that we're a couple and we're secure in that and we can go off and do our own thing a few nights a week and nobody's offended about that. But like before that, I kind of need to reel it back to the beginning where it all started because yeah, I would spend as much time as I could with my family, but then there was nights I would just um write, from 10 to 2 in the morning and then just work tired the next day. I mean,
Mhm. Yep.
it was sort of when the work from home thing was starting 6 or 7 years, 8 years ago.
Mhm.
Because I was working for a company down in Boulder. It was a nonprofit down in Boulder, and that we had a work from home policy where I could work from home 2 days a week. And
Right.
so I just the nights that I knew I could work from home and didn't have to drive the hour and a half to get there, I would just stay up late and work on the books. And because I wrote book one and two back to back, I literally just wrote all the way through. And then I wrote into book three. But then when, again, going back to like when Ron really put the conviction in me to make this happen, and it was sort of like the first draft is what happened all
Mhm.
that in all that time. Then I went back and as I started to take it serious was when the real writing actually began
Right.
because the books were not well written. Like the first two books were not well written at first.
Mhm.
It was just like kind of stream of conscious, just
Right.
brain dumping. Um, so when it really started to happen, I would say those late night sessions were more about reading what I wrote and then rewriting it. And I literally would pull up the doc of what I wrote and
Mhm.
then rewrite it in a new doc and then just use that first one as reference.
Mhm.
But if you could see the first draft versus, what ended up being in the books, they're totally different.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
which is
Especially
as
the
they should
first one.
be. But
As
yeah,
you go along and write book three, four, five, however far you're going to take it, I think you'll see that difference less and less because you'll be
it
honed
is.
in on what it is that
Yeah.
you've already got. But when you're first starting a project and you're like, I have to create these characters from scratch, I have to create where it is, what time in the world it is, what the environment is like, all those things. Yeah, it is easy to get so focused on that you're just like you read back what you wrote last night and you're like, what the hell
Yeah.
was I even talking about? Like,
Yeah.
none of this makes sense to me. I got to
Right.
fix all this.
Right. I was definitely tired when I wrote this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but again, like just to what I love about part of what I love about my process is I found, two people. Well, I mean, Ron has read a lot of most of what I wrote, actually. He hasn't read anything from book three yet, but he actually read book one and book two before you and Laurel
Okay.
got involved. So that's to, I guess, sidebar is my daughter Laurel, who is an amazing writer on her own behalf and also an incredible lighting designer.
Hmm.
She's my other beta reader for everybody that's listening.
Right.
Um, and so Ron helped me sort of shape the direction, but then it was you and Laurel that really helped me kind of sharpen the edges.
Mhm.
What Ron is great at is the storytelling part.
Mhm.
Like there was things I would send to Ron and he'd literally write back and go, nope, don't do that. Just don't do that. It's you know,
Yeah.
and so then I would just keep rewriting and just sending him chapters until he was happy. And I thought it was ready to go, but then the direction kind of changed, and I went back and rewrote book one and book two again. And I feel like and I gave him the manuscripts after I rewrote them, and he was very happy with them,
Good.
and that's important to me too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess the process is my process is very cyclical. Kind of to get back to your question, it's but the cycles have gotten like less dramatic, I guess is the way
Okay.
to say it.
Hmm.
Like book one was this big cycle, and then book
Right.
two was kind of a shorter cycle,
Hmm.
and I feel like book three, um, I have maybe the first, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 chapters written, first draft.
Nice.
Um, and the goal is to have it available March 18th of 2026.
Hmm.
Um, that date is significant because it's my anniversary date, and
Right.
so it's kind of fun having the book releases tied to that.
Hmm.
Um, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, I am I'm definitely trying to shorten the cycles, and I mean, there's no doubt I'm getting better as a writer.
Yeah. Oh,
You and
for
Laurel
sure. Yeah.
both told me that from book one to book two. Like book one was, I have all the confidence in the world that book one was good.
Hmm.
I feel like book two is better just because it was my first book, and book
Yeah.
two is my second book. And as any artist will tell you, you get better as you go, right? And
Well, sure.
so,
You start to feel more comfortable with what you're saying, but also more confident saying
yeah,
it. And
yes,
those things will show up, especially because when you're first starting out, you don't have anyone, you don't have the benefit of any feedback yet. You know,
right,
you can easily fall into all the writer traps, all the storytelling traps, all that sort of thing. But after you've been through a book and you've had people read it and go, okay, here's what I didn't understand. So when you're explaining this kind of stuff, you have to look at it from this standpoint so that your audience understands it, and you learn those things. The only way you're going to learn them is by getting through the process. You
yeah,
can read about it in a textbook, you could hear about it in a classroom setting, but honestly the only way to experience is to just experience it and get through it.
yeah, I agree, 100%.
Yeah. Now, I can't remember now, did you have a like an outline for the book?
No, my outlines are my outlines are ridiculous. Like it's chapter one, and then I have like a working title,
Mhm.
and I'll literally write, Caridwen and Rayanne interact about X, and then Callie at Glen Durrell doing this, and then Raspberry and whoever are here. And
Mhm.
it's I really my outlines are more making sure that I keep the characters not being absent for more than a couple chapters.
You know what?
That's my those are my outlines. They're that
That's
dumb.
important. I'll tell you what, the that's a brilliant thing because I can't tell you how many books, and I used to listen to books more than like sit down and physically read them just because of
Mm-hmm.
time. But I remember on some of my trips from Phoenix to Vegas, I would listen to audiobooks and I would listen, like I love John Grisham's stories. I love his storytelling and all that. But I would get so lost because he would have a character that appeared on page three and then not again for like 6 hours when I'm on the
Right.
last CD or the second to the last CD. I'm like, I remember this person, but I don't know who they are. I don't know
Yeah.
what their relationship is to anybody. I'm too far removed from them to even matter to me or for me to care that they're going through this or causing that because I'm just too disconnected from them. So I like the idea of keeping everybody in play in a
Yes.
reasonably recent time frame.
Yeah. And I definitely feel like what if I could go back and start it over, although I don't know how I would do it, but I think and Ron actually mentioned this to me once. He said you're really biting off a lot with the number of characters that
Yeah.
you have in your story. Like he
Yeah.
he flat out told me. He said you, you have really bitten off a lot. So make
Mhm.
sure that you know keep that in mind as you're writing, because it has been hard. I do have a lot of main characters,
You do,
and
but isn't that common in fantasy?
it is sorta, but if you look at, even The Hobbit, you got the band of dwarves and you got Bilbo and you have Gandalf, but really it's like Gandalf and Bilbo. I mean, people will argue with me when they hear that, but there's maybe only a few main characters, and then there's just the story that happens around it.
Right.
You know, I have so many characters that I'm trying to make real to people. Um, that I have created sort of a I've created a situation for myself that I need to write my way out of.
Well,
But
but it's easy to fall into that because
yeah,
there's when there's too many people to focus on, you want to make an interesting story for all of the characters. You want to
yeah,
make them people that the readers will connect to, even whether they're a good or a bad guy.
yeah,
It's tough, but if you don't have enough characters, then you don't have people to kill off out of nowhere. You don't have enough interweaving stories to make it interesting. I mean, you've got to
yeah,
have a certain element. I will say there are a lot of characters, but I don't feel like, I mean, other than the gap between book one and two, which is always difficult for me because I'll tend to forget a lot of I'll
yeah,
remember key parts of the story, but not
right.
who the people are. And so when I start reading the next book, I'm like, oh God, okay, who was this again? I think
Yeah,
they were, and I go through that. But apart from that, no, I think it's good to have a good cast because the way that you juggle them keeps everybody in play almost at all times.
yeah, I agree. And some of it too is part of having a larger cast of characters was trying to make sure that there's somebody that anybody reading it can relate to in
Mhm.
the end.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, you as a beta reader know I've one of the things that I was really trying to establish was a strong cast of both male and female,
Hmm.
and it does lean a little more into the strong female character side of things. Like I feel like the world I created definitely shows that women are highly empowered
Right.
and highly important, and that was on purpose.
Hmm.
But even down to where you look at, I mean, I still have characters like Mythalis and Aeolus, um, who are really strong male characters too. Like they have their strong place in the world.
Right.
But then you have your, Raspberry Fiddlebow, who everybody loves. She's like
Hmm.
everybody's favorite character. Also, sidebar, my favorite to write.
Hmm.
Um, she's sort of the um, how do you say it? She's like the glue that holds everything
Hmm.
together.
Yeah. But
And I
she's
feel
also
like
the innocence too, because she's very
she
young.
is.
She's
Yeah.
seen a lot, but she's also inexperienced at the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
And that was sort of the whole point with her. Well, and I had told you this privately one time when we were discussing the chapters. Her role was never to be a main character.
Right.
She was
Mhm.
supposed to pop in and out every now and then and just sort of be there. And it was an important part that I had thought of her. Um, but the more that I wrote her, even in the early goings, as I just thought this character has to be
Yeah. Well, I
highly
mean,
important, and
she's
she
such a
is.
lovable character, and
Yeah,
she's got again got a good heart,
yeah,
and she's really like trying to learn and be genuine, but she's also been thrust into a very difficult world. I
yeah.
mean,
She has.
I would this be categorized as like medieval fantasy? Would that be the right way to say
Yeah,
it?
medieval fantasy. It's and theist. There's
Mhm.
there's a power above all that is sort of overseeing everything. I don't try to be too heavy-handed about that.
Right.
But there is, there's a there's a deity structure in place, um, but it's not. How do I say it? It's not like everybody has free will. That's
Right.
sort of the whole point of the book is people
Hmm.
have free will, and how you choose to make your decisions will have consequences. You know,
Yeah.
but there's the classic tropey battle of good versus evil, and so there's bad people and good people, or bad individuals and good individuals, because there's multi races and all that. But um, yeah, the idea is just that there's everybody has choices to make in their life, and those choices are going to set your path. You know,
Yeah.
nobody is gonna nobody is born with your destiny's already established for you. You
Hmm.
know, there might be a plan for you,
Right.
but
Right.
you are going to make choices and things are going to happen based on your choices. And that was
Hmm.
always sort of the goal, was to show that we as individuals have a free will, and these characters have a free will, and the decisions those characters make are going to determine what happens to them. And like, I guess Raspberry is a great example of that, because she was never meant to leave We Folk Wood, and then she did. And
Hmm.
as she did, her whole life changed. Because,
Right.
you know, I don't feel like this is a spoiler, but she would have grew up on a farm. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But she decided she was going to leave We Folk Wood, and her whole life changed as a result of that, right? Because
Yeah,
she
because
had,
I mean, she wouldn't have done anything noteworthy in her life. She would have existed, worked until she died, and that would have been
yeah,
that.
I would say that more than that, she wouldn't have made an impact on anybody
Yes.
outside of her little village. She
Hmm.
would not have impacted anybody. But then you have another character, Rayanne. All she ever wanted to do was stay home.
Right.
So like, there's a dichotomy between Rayanne and Raspberry, in that
Hmm.
Rayanne never wanted to leave home, and then she did, and her life changed.
Right.
And Raspberry didn't know what she wanted and decided to leave home, and then her life changed. And
Hmm.
there's dialogues that show those characters in particular, you know, what happened. And then Mythalis is a great character in terms of how his life, because of a, you know, what turned out to be a horrible decision,
Right.
how that sucked him into a world that he never thought he would be in. And then he had consequences for that in book one, and had to go through an entire process, you know, to,
But you need that because if
yeah,
you don't like, if you think about real life, we don't go out of our way to go out of our comfort zone, right? So we aren't going
yeah,
to have any grand adventures unless we do something to be willing to do that, or something is thrust upon us that causes us to go on it when we didn't want to. So I mean, if these characters don't get pushed to do something out of their norm, then every day is just a Monday thing. And I can live that. I don't want to read about that in a book.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, it's kind of like every character has their own sort of thing that either pushed them or kept them within, you know, what they, but of course it's a fantasy story, and
Yeah.
circumstances are going to force characters to change. And so they all have their journeys. But um yeah, like some of it is keeping track of all that. Like,
Yeah.
that becomes that becomes a challenge. And then you know, getting like, kind of getting back to your question about my process, you know, there's been times where I'll take a lull, but then it starts to gnaw on you that
Hmm.
you're not doing it, you know.
A creator's got to create. That's the thing. I
Yeah,
mean, even if you're doing it for your job, it's not the same fulfillment as creating your own thing and making it a
right,
tangible thing for
right,
people to experience.
yeah,
Even with the feedback, like yes, if a director is telling me on a film score, or whoever is in charge of your corporate work is telling you, that yes, this is good, no, we need to change this or whatever, you're still taking that very much to heart, even though it's not your baby. When
sure,
you start
yeah,
doing stuff that is 100% like, this is my dream thing, is to write this story, and you start doing it, there's a completely different level of pressure there.
yes, I agree 100%. And I guess maybe that's sort of the blessing of, I'm not under any pressure by anybody to create a certain thing.
Right.
It really is something that I get to just make my own.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, you know, if it ever turned into where someone wanted to buy it and turn it into something, you know, I would, honestly, I have other stories in my head, and I would sell it, and then I would just move on to those other things and let it
Yeah.
happen. I mean, that goes again, kind of goes back to George R. R. Martin. Um, you know, when he sold the rights to what became Game of Thrones,
Mhm.
you know, I remember somebody asking him at a con, they said, "Well, how do you feel that they changed it?" And he goes, "They're just telling the same story in a different way, and that's fine."
Right.
But then he sidebarred and he goes, "And they also, you know, sent several dump trucks full of money to my house, so I was fine with it."
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you
Right.
just
Yeah.
at some point you got to go like, "Hey, I got paid."
Well,
So
yeah, and I mean, and look at George Lucas with the deal that he made for
yeah,
the toys in the early with episode 4, and I mean that was brilliant. He's like, you know what, I think this will do fine. To get to point B, we have to do this or this or this. So
right,
I'm going to take this route, and obviously it paid off for him because going for
sure,
the toys instead of the film, we would have had a much lesser film, and
yeah,
toys would have flown off the shelf, and that would have been that,
yeah, yeah,
But it is interesting because you do have to write from a perspective of being able to dictate what happens within these worlds and to these characters, and you're making their
hmm,
decisions for them, but also you have to look at and respect the story on the whole. Like, you can't just have some plague
yeah,
that comes in and kills off most of your characters and there's a handful that survive if it doesn't make sense in the context of the story.
yes, agreed, 100%. Um, yeah, I mean, it has to make sense.
Yeah.
But again, maybe that's what it comes down to is if you do sell it, you have to understand it's not yours anymore. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I doubt it will. I just for me right now, there's like a my motivation is that this is my side thing that I
Mhm.
do, and I do it I do it daily.
Yeah.
If I'm not working on the writing of it, I'm thinking about what's coming in the next chapters. And though I have loose outlines of the entire story, um, the story writes itself. I mean, I know
Yeah.
that's very tropey to say, but it really does.
Well, and
Um,
if you have an outline that goes too far, and I experienced this so many times doing the Universal Court, you just make one change spontaneously while you're in that creative zone and writing. Now your entire outline is out the window.
yeah, and you have to. I agree, and you have to. That's why I've never done it that way. Like I know other writers that do these real deeply intricate outlines,
Mm.
and they just stick to that outline. But
Yeah.
I found myself so many times with a plan and an idea, and then I start writing, and then 3 chapters later, I go, that doesn't make sense, and I end up.
Right.
That's why I was saying my writing style is very cyclical because
Mhm.
I'll think of something 3 chapters later, and then I have to go back and rewrite what I wrote
Right.
to make sure that it makes sense with what's coming now that I've thought of this new thing, you know, and that's why that's why I've learned to make my outlines very, very loose.
Mhm.
And it's really just about, again, it's just about making sure the characters are being mentioned enough that people don't forget who's who.
Right.
Um, but it sounds really like, kind of goofy, but the characters do end up having their own voices in your
Mhm.
head, and
Oh, yeah, for
that's
sure.
nothing weird. That's not. I'm not trying to be all new agey about that. That's not
Mhm.
at all what it is. It's just that you're writing these different characters, and they do end up having their own personalities and their own voices
Sure.
and their own impact on the story as a whole. And you end up you do, as the person who's writing all that down, need to be able to sort of, in a way, separate your own. I mean, you're part of all of them, but
Yeah.
they also sort of start to take on a life of their own. And
But that's what makes them lovable, and that's what makes them
yeah,
believable in as characters.
yeah,
If they're doing things that people just wouldn't do.
yeah,
Like I always say, you can take me on whatever journey you want to. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I don't care what it is. Within the context of that world, everything has to be believable. Otherwise
yeah,
you start to lose me, you know.
yeah. And having, like, I don't know what it is, maybe 14 main characters. They all have to seem like they're their own person. They all can't
Right.
be Scott, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, for starters, we're all not male, like,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
from the very
exactly.
basic biology of it. Like, but then from there, you know, they're fantasy characters. They're
Mm,
doing these fantastical hero type things that have to be part of their journey and part of who they are. And fantasy is writing about even in a world like Aimsire, like I'm writing, uh, it's full of a bunch of basic people
mm,
and individuals, but then there's this core of people that are super, elevated, and they
right.
got these incredible abilities, and they can cast magic, and they're super fast with their swords and
Mhm.
whatever. And that's who you're writing about. And so you have to, obviously, I'm not any of that. I don't know. This is sounding weird, but it's just like you have to put yourself into a position where you're allowing them to be who they are in your brain.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
why I always tell people, like, I got to get this out of my brain. Like, it's
Mhm.
just because you do, as a creative, start to cycle on who these characters are and whatnot. And
Yeah.
like, a really, this, I tell this story sometimes and people kind of laugh at me, and that's fine. I've been laughed at most of my life. So, but there was a time when I was writing book one, um, and I'd really gone for it for about 6 months, and then I was just exhausted. My brain was just tired, and I stopped writing, and I just needed to take a break. And it was about 2 months. And as you know, Scott, like when you get out of the habit, now all of a sudden the habit is to not do it.
Right.
And yeah, and so it was about 2.5 months. I hadn't worked on the book at all. It just sat on my server, and this is like, honest to goodness, I dreamt that I was walking in my world that I was creating,
Mhm.
and I'm in this forest and I'm walking through Aimsire, and I recognized it in my dream.
Mhm.
Like, I've always been a person that can be aware that they're dreaming.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and I'm walking, and I was in my dream, literally like, oh, this is Aimsire. Like, this, oh, this is the world I've been writing about.
Mhm.
And I kind of was turning to the left and turning to the right, and I turned to the left, and then I turned back, and Callie, who, as you know, is a very major character in my story,
Yes.
um, she was walking beside me in her wizard robes, and I could smell the spell regions, like I always write about. Like, I always try to write in the five senses,
Mhm.
and I could smell the spell regions coming out of the folds of her robes, and she was walking beside me, and her hood was over her head. And as we're walking, I was looking at her, and I went, Callie, and she turned to me and she flipped her hood off, and she went, you forgot about us.
Wow.
And I went, no, I haven't. And she went, yes, you have. And she just disappeared.
Mhm.
And the and the next night I started writing again.
Wow.
And like,
I heard a similar story though with Stephen King doing the Dark Tower series after he had the
wow.
accident in the with the
Yeah,
van hitting him when he was out, and that just like he started to get haunted by it. And I mean, I don't know how much truth was in that article, but
sure.
it's certainly understandable because like I said, creators have to create. And when we
Yeah.
have something that becomes a project that we care about and it's a defined project, when we're not working on it, we do start to feel guilty or get these little fragments that try
Yeah.
and urge us back in that direction again.
Yeah. And I think that's what it was. I think I was feeling guilty about not working on it.
Mhm.
And, you know, for whatever reason, it manifested itself into a dream.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'll be the
Typical
first
Callie.
person. Yeah, Callie. She's so rad. I love Callie.
I do too. She's
she's
a
she's
great
no
character.
nonsense.
Yes, very much so.
um, but yeah, so like, and that's the other funny thing about that. It's funny you bring that up, because I remember thinking of all the characters
Right,
to
yeah.
show up and
Hmm.
call me out.
Yep.
Like,
But
it
but
would have been
that
her or Caridwen. Those are
but
the only two.
yes, that's true. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Or someone from the council, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's like you conjured that because that's what you needed to tell yourself
Yeah,
to
I know.
to
That's
push you
exactly
back
right.
in that direction. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and it
really
did.
interesting.
It definitely pushed me back into working on it, and then that's when I finally finished the edit of book one, like what I felt was the final edit and ready to
Mhm.
go. And then that was when you and Laurel got involved
Yeah.
to help me to beta read it and help me really kind of push it, to its
I remember
final
that
fruition.
because when you told me you were afraid that I wasn't going to still be committed, which of course I was. I mean, you and I have had decades of supporting each other's art, and
Yeah.
there's no way I wouldn't do it. But I just remember feeling this incredible sense of excitement because you finally got it to that point, and I knew what it meant to you
Yeah.
to have done that. But I want
I
to ask you,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I forgot that you were part of that gap.
Mhm.
Remember, like, you saying that reminded me. Yeah,
Yeah.
you had been reading, and then I hadn't given you anything for a while.
Hmm.
So yeah.
But when you pushed the button the first time at the end of book one and said,
Mhm.
"Okay, I've got it all uploaded to Amazon. I've checked the format. I've had my beta readers. This is done. This is a done deal." And you push that button. That was a hard thing.
Yeah.
When it came to the second book, what was there a difference in how it felt to press that button?
Nah, it was definitely just more excitement.
Okay, good. That's the
Yeah, like
direction it should go in. Yeah.
the first book was scary.
Hmm.
The second book was a little scary, but way more just excitement.
Good. That's
Yeah.
the direction it should go in.
Yeah. And I'm like really pushing hard to get book three done because I'm so excited based on finishing book two
Hmm.
that now I'm hyper motivated to just finish it, you know?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I don't know, like, this is going to probably go at least four, maybe five books.
Hmm.
Um, and then it could spin off, but there's also a part of me that, like, I have other ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know yet. You know, like right now, I'm just enjoying being in this process. And um, what I want to do now is just make sure I get, um, like, right now, it's the main story, right? Like, it's like the saga um,
Right.
of, like the main story. I might spin something off, but I really don't know yet. I have ideas for that, but there's also a little bit of me that thinks like maybe it would be fun to write in another genre too.
Well, I think
Um,
the thing with this is that it's such an unlimited thing. I mean,
yeah,
you can always have a villager that just comes randomly walking into a familiar place. Now you've started a new timeline. You can connect those two stories, but it's its
yeah,
own thing. I mean, you could literally do that for anything. I feel with other genres like drama, I just feel like there has to be some kind of beginning, middle, and end to it that I think with fantasy you could drag out that middle for a very long time and intersect it with other
yeah,
middles.
and I agree with that. But I there's also that bit of me like before we started the podcast where you and I were talking about how they'll take a great concept and then make a second one.
Hmm.
However many years later, and then the second one is not as good, and
Right.
then and then they'll drag it out again and make a third, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like there is a little bit of me that's like, hey, get the story you've thought of written,
Mm.
and then maybe just let it be what it is, and because I'm not again, I have the luxury of not having to do this for money.
Right.
you know, like
Yeah.
I work for a wonderful guy, um, for a great company, and I do something that I love every week for my job.
Mm.
And so this really, as much as I love it, and I would say it is a passion hobby of mine, it's like it can fail and we still eat. And I
Right. Yeah.
definitely that is a blessing because
Well,
I
yeah, I get that,
realize
but it's also soothing that artist soul of yours that, that I
100%.
saw on day
Yeah.
one. I think the thing is though is that there's just different levels of satisfaction in life. Yes, it's not going to hurt you or destroy your family to not have this be successful. I think personally the success started when you sat down and put the first word down. And then when
Yeah.
you finish book one, that was a huge success. Whatever happens to it
Yeah.
outside of that is outside of that, but the success is the completion. The
Right.
I dreamed this up. I started working on it. Hit and miss over the years, but I finally got there and I finished it. And now I'm working on the next installment of it. There are so many accomplishments that go along with that. It's really insane.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I'm trying to remember the exact stat. I think it was 4% of people that have an idea for a story actually write it down and publish it.
There you go. Yeah.
And what's crazy about that is, and you know this from your own experience, it doesn't cost you anything to publish it.
No, not at all. But
All you have to do,
I think the problem is more that it's an intimidating thing. Like I just had a
yeah,
conversation with
yeah,
a friend of mine helping her start an Etsy store. And she had gone on before to try and do it. She's like, it was just so overwhelming. There's all this information I have to put in. She's like, I just can't do this and got away from it. And I get that because it is a lot to do. But if you break it down and start, step by step, okay, what's the first box? Let's just get the first box done.
yeah,
But I think it's just unknown is scary.
hmm,
And, self-publishing sounds like a very big, daunting mountain. It really does. Once
yeah,
you've done it, you realize how simple it really is.
yeah.
But to get yourself to that point can be very traumatic and can make people stop doing the art because they can't figure out how to get the art out there.
Yeah, and that's true. And there's it's definitely not small, and
Hmm.
it's not something to be, sort of shoved aside, but it's definitely, I guess anybody that's listening to this, if one person gets inspired by that, it's not hard. And
Yeah.
just do it. I mean,
Mhm.
it took 20 years to publish the Twins of Aimsire.
Right.
It was 20 years
Hmm.
when I like 20 years before I published it was when the ideas for it started forming in my head.
Yeah.
And like I had said earlier, I really truly wrote book one and two just right through because
Hmm.
it was all going to be one book, and then I realized this is too much for one book, and so
Yeah.
then I started. Part of the process was determining like, okay, what should I have in book one versus book two, and
Hmm.
etc. But um, like I don't want people to think. I guess the one thing I it doesn't you don't have to do it in a year.
Yeah.
It can
There's no
take two
time on it. Yeah.
decades. It's okay.
Hmm.
Like Amazon's not going anywhere. Let's be honest.
Right.
Bezos needs another yacht, so it's
Yeah.
going to be around. And so, like, um, it's okay if it takes 10 years.
Yeah.
Like,
But I,
do it an hour or two a night, and
but
just let it be that. Like,
I think that you would agree with me is that it's not just about doing it, it's about doing it the way that you feel it needs to be done.
oh
Like
yeah,
not compromising on the story because you're like, I really wanted to finish this by Christmas, so I'm just going to end it here, or I'm just going to hurry up and
right,
do this or that. Like,
yeah,
make sure at the end of the day that you're happy with the product or the art itself. I hate calling it a product, but if you release it, it is.
it sort of is. Yeah,
But be happy with that. Otherwise, you're going to regret it. You're never going to want to do anything again because you didn't take the time to do it right. And when I say right, I mean in a way that makes you happy.
yes,
Yeah.
and like again, I was able to put book one out and then put book two out exactly a year later,
Hmm.
and I'm aiming for book three to be a year later,
Right.
but that's a that's a stretch goal. I
Hmm.
admit that's like an aggressive, but to your point, if it's not exactly the way I want it, it's not coming out March 18th of 2026. I mean,
Right.
I'll now for me, the reason that I feel kind of I want to do that is I don't want people to, as we had discussed, a little bit ago, I don't want people to forget the characters.
Right.
Um, even a year is a long time, but let's be honest, it's a book. You can't you can't
Yeah.
churn a book out every 2 weeks. So
Exactly. Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's a goal, but I'm not going to your point, I'm not going to compromise if I don't feel like it's exactly the way I want it. And I am
I
rewriting a lot of stuff that I wrote
mhm.
already for book three. Like I'm retooling, and some of the stuff that I had originally written for book three is actually going to now be in book four.
Well, see, and
So,
that excites me because I know when I go to read it, I know what you've put into it. And I
oh,
know that you
thanks.
care enough to make sure that you did exactly what you just said. Because if you didn't, you're going to look back on it and go, I wish I would have. I really should have. I should have taken the time. And you're just going to,
Yeah.
end up burning yourself into not wanting to do it again.
Yeah, and that's like I guess for me to echo what you're saying, like that's once I've said, okay, we're good to go on book one,
Hmm.
I've said we're good to go on book two,
Yeah,
like that's the thing with self-publishing. I could make edits right now to book one and then re-upload the file, and
sure.
people who buy it from, about tomorrow on would get a different version
Right.
of what was out there a year ago. But
Hmm.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not
No.
going to, I mean, no disrespect to George Lucas, but I'm not going to George Lucas it.
That was the first thing that just popped into my head. Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. Like
Right.
for me, it's like, okay, that's what I did, and
Hmm.
it is what's been done, and it's published. And I admit, book one is not. There's. I've gone through it again, and I'm like, all right, there's a couple little grammatical errors and a little wordy at times and things, but again, it was my first book.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
a
I think,
writer.
you know
I
what?
mean,
I
like,
think,
I'm not a trained writer. I just wrote because I liked it.
but
Like,
I don't know why somebody wouldn't expect an artist to have a progression of growth from project to project,
yeah,
just like the characters do in the story. So,
yeah,
for example, I look back on some of the earlier songs that I wrote, and it's like they're so repetitive, and one of them I just absolutely loathe. But when I look at it, I'm like, this is a time marker of
Yeah.
where I was at in my creative abilities, in my, audio engineering skills, in my, harmonizing skills and all that. So
Right.
it's really a testament to where I was in time at that
Yeah.
point. And
That's totally true.
if I look at the art as I would have written it, like if I try and get into that mentality again, I can say, you know what, this was pretty good for where I was at the time. Just
Yeah.
because I'm way further than that now doesn't mean that that piece doesn't have some validity because it's where I was at the time.
Sure.
I wouldn't
That
write that now.
right. Right.
I would do this instead, or I would develop it this way instead. But at the time, that
Yeah.
was the way that I did things. So it's just a
Yeah.
marker, really.
I agree. And like one of the luxuries I've had as a graphic designer for my career um is you don't sign anything.
Hmm.
So if somebody brings you something that you did 15 years ago and they go, "We heard you did this logo," you can go, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Right? Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like you didn't sign anything. XYZ company paid you to do it.
Mhm.
So
And
that was one thing we used to joke about in design school is that you don't sign anything, so nobody
right,
knows you did it.
that's right.
But my
Except
books, my name's on the cover, so you
well, yeah. And it's more personal because it's you're developing your idea instead of you developing someone else's. I mean, you're still
yeah.
invested in that to an
Oh,
extent,
100%. Yeah.
but there's a big difference between the two. But speaking
Yeah.
of logos, I have to
Okay.
say, and I will forever thank you a million times for these. You did the logos for Uriah Heep, the Magician's podcast, and Deep Purple Smoke on the podcast. Every time
I
I post
I
an
did.
episode of either one, I smile because of the great work that you put into it, but also
Oh,
just
thanks.
because you and I have been a part of each other's artist journeys for so long. And
Yes,
I just
since high
I
school.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too, man. I'm so blessed that we met when we did. Like you've always been um so important to me, and I've told you this before. I admire you so much, and for anybody listening, this is not me like trying to butter up Scott Haskin. It's just Haskin is
Yeah, you're
uh
already on the show, okay?
I know, I'm already here. Like it's just that I've told you this before in private. You are the most prolific, like you just have always you just grinding all the time. And I so respect that about you.
I
And it's
appreciate
very,
that.
it's very inspirational. So I just got to get that in again. I know I've told you that like 1,000 times, but um, yeah, it's I just
You
I
will,
can't thank you enough,
and
buddy.
I appreciate that. And I feel very much the same about you. I don't know if I've ever said this, but the transition when we moved to Colorado was incredibly difficult for me. I mean, here I am, just before I turned 16. We had been in a car accident. It had been a really rough year, and then the next thing you know, like I'm being uprooted from my childhood home, where I thought I would spend the rest of my life with these people and being put into a new school a month before the school year ended. So like a
Yeah,
lot of people that I met were seniors, and I'm like, starting the junior year, like now I'm starting over again.
right.
But you were one of the people that really helped me with that transition, and just the open arms that you greeted me with, the artistic ways that we connected, and just like that insta friendship that we had made it a
Yeah.
much easier process. And I'll never be able to thank you enough for
Oh,
that, because that was a
thanks,
pretty
man.
tough time.
And it's funny because I didn't know that till recently.
Hmm.
But yeah, I know we talked about this on the first time I was on your podcast, and we've talked about this on the phone and stuff. But I just remember you walking in. I don't remember what class it was, but you walked in, and I was just like, I gotta know that guy.
It was history.
'Cause, oh, history, okay.
Mhm.
Because I remember you walking in, and you just walked in with a presence, and it was. I mean, you had that long, beautiful red hair.
Yep. It was all
Yeah,
it was hair is what I walked in with. It was
and
hair
you
and
had
probably a jean jacket. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you were wearing a jean jacket and a deep
Mhm.
purple t-shirt.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I was just like, I gotta know this guy.
Actually, I
I have
think
to know this
I
guy.
could be wrong, but I think it was I had painted, because this was back just at the end of that time when painting album covers on jean jackets was
On
a
your
pretty
jean
cool thing to
jacket,
do.
yeah.
And we
Yeah.
had a really cool artist in Michigan that I went to high school with that was very, very good at that, did very great detailed work. But I did my hand at it, and I picked the easiest album cover I could have picked, which was Deep Purple and Rock, which was basically like a Mount Rushmore. And that was on the back of that jacket that I wore to school that first day. I remember
Nice.
that specifically. It was like It's like when you go to prison and whatever your gang sign is, like you flash that to find your
Right,
tribe.
right. You
That
got to
was
find your peoples.
exactly why I wore that jacket. And
Yeah.
plus, it was cold.
Cool, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
But yeah,
I
I
just
mean, it was
yeah.
amazing because like just right off the bat we hit it off, and I was
Yeah.
I was
I
really
remember you
grateful
sat
for
next to
that.
me and we just started talking,
Mhm.
and it was just kind of just went from there.
I think I was
So
most excited too that we were in the same grade. So like I actually
yeah.
had somebody to come back to the next year and at least have some kind of connection with because like I said
Yeah.
most of the people I met were seniors. So I was like, "Oh, this guy's cool. Oh, well, guess I won't see you next year." I was
Yeah.
I was already feeling very isolated and that. So no, that really helped. But you're somebody who I've just appreciated to death as an artist and as a friend and just somebody who I'm grateful is part of society because I think you're one of those people that makes society a better place. And man, thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That was a beautiful compliment. And I feel the same way about you. I know I told you this like 100 times, but your music, like I listen to your, your sauna albums as I edit. It's just,
Mhm.
they're so, they just perfect brain stimulation, and I like music that doesn't have lyrics when I'm writing, just
Yeah.
simply because if I hear lyrics, like I'm right out of the
Oh, yeah,
story.
you get totally
So the
distracted.
mental
Yeah.
sauna albums really keep me in my place.
Mm-hmm.
And then I even posted on when I was doing the final edits for book two,
Mm-hmm.
I had done the and I'm so sorry. It's like it's the world's one.
Oh, Mental Son of Four Worlds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That was on repeat. I just listened to it over and over and over as I did the last 5 chapters
That's
of book
awesome.
two. I did it over the weekend,
Hmm.
all weekend, and that's like the climax of the story of book two,
I
and
love that.
it's
I,
just on
I love
repeat, man.
I love that you can write like these high energy scenes where so much is going on and but you like your background to that is really quiet, just gentle, relaxing music.
Yeah. Well, I will admit there's been other music I've listened to that was a little more forceful for certain
Sure,
things, but
yeah.
especially for the editing, your mental
Mm.
sauna albums are perfect
That's
because I've
awesome.
already written it. Now I'm just trying to bring it down enough to, you know,
Yeah.
so, but I admit there's some of the there's trying to remember. Anyway, there's another artist on YouTube that when I'm especially battle scenes, I
Hmm.
because he does a lot of Viking music, and
Oh,
so
cool. Yeah.
I'm
That's good
not in any
stuff.
way
Yep.
Swedish, but it's like all the drums and stuff. When
Hmm.
I'm writing intense battle scenes, I admit
Yeah. Well, I
those
mean,
get
when I was
queued
writing the
up.
Universal Chord, I had a selection of Michael Giacchino's music from Lost that I would
Oh,
listen to,
nice.
and
Yeah,
I mean,
I
probably the
see that.
last like 15 chapters or so,
Yeah.
and some of them were really long pieces, which helped. Like Mental Sauna Worlds, those pieces are like 10, 11 minutes a piece, so that
Yes.
that helps. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing the things that we use as our mood enhancers to stay in a certain zone or to be able
Yeah.
to push through. And I found it harder to work to my own music only because I would get distracted by my own music and
Sure.
start going, oh, I mixed that badly, or I could have done this, or I should have thrown
Right.
that in there. Or, what was I thinking?
Right.
But I did get to the point where I could actually write screenplays to my music, but I could not write the Universal Court to my own music. There was some
Interesting.
some difference about writing a book versus a screenplay format, maybe. Um,
Yeah, I
but
can see that.
that means a
I can
lot
see
to
that.
me that my
Yeah.
music connected with you and
Oh
allowed you
yeah, man.
to get through that.
Yeah. Well, and even in Twins, I called out Mental Sauna because even
Yeah,
for the
that's right.
Twins of Aimsire, I used the your Mental Sauna albums a lot for editing in
Aimsire,
particular.
you say?
Aimsire, it's
Aimsire.
Aimsire.
Aimsire. We'll see what happens. I'll let you know.
All right,
Uh,
buddy.
Now, of course, as always, guys that are listening, the links are in the show notes for both Scott's Amazon page, where you can pick up both books. They are available in print and Kindle version. Is that right?
Yeah, this is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Are you planning on doing audio at some point? Is that has that been something?
Yes, I have to look into that to be honest. I don't I have not had time to even look into how to do that. So,
Well, when
and
you're ready, give me a call.
I do not want to use AI. So,
No,
I haven't
no.
used AI for any of this.
No,
So
there's still like real human readers that read books, and
yeah, and they
uh,
deserve the opportunity.
absolutely.
But yeah, I'll reach out to you, man, for sure,
Yeah,
because I
please do.
have thought about. Um, I know that there's actually a lot of people that have reached out to me about audio versions.
Hmm.
And then the plan is after book three, which is going to be called The Claws of Aimsire. Um,
Aimsire, you say?
Aimsire is the world, Aimsire, Aimsire. Um,
Come
the
on,
Claws of
algorithm.
Aimsire will be book three, and then from there I will probably do book one through three in a hardback, all like a
Nice.
compendium of all three books in one.
I like that.
Um, yeah, and then so that's why I'm thinking I might end up doing six because then I can do two compendiums. I don't know that
Right.
that's all. Again, my outlines are very dumb, so
But then you'll
see what
have to do
happens.
a third one so that you can make it a trilogy and like a
Yeah,
human centipede of hardcover books.
yeah,
But the thing is with audio, what's interesting is a lot of people that love to read because of our lifestyles now. And I say that in not as a victim because it's our choice how we tend to spend our time. But I think we found so many distractions with everything being streaming and all this now that our lifestyles have changed. I don't know that as many people just sit down with a book on a couch and just read. Like I
yeah.
remember
I
I
agree.
think the last book I read cover to cover as a physical book was the Da Vinci Code. And I just sat there
Gotcha.
on the couch. I did nothing else. I did not leave the house. I ate and sat on the couch and that was it. I think I probably ordered
Wow.
pizza, so I didn't
Yeah.
even have to, cook. And
Yeah.
I loved, I missed that. I missed having just that time where I was not so busy, not trying to do so many things that I could just soak into a good book and
Yeah.
read it. And I think that's kind of the world we live in. So people are now like they're listening to podcasts, they're listening to audiobooks on their commute, while they're grocery shopping, while they're,
Yeah.
painting the house or cleaning or whatever. I think that's become the method for a lot of people. So by doing print only, I do feel like we're missing a good chunk of audience just because of that lifestyle change.
Yeah. I agree for accessibility, it would be
Yeah.
something very wise to do. But um, to what you just said, I do have to give a shout out to my buddy Raymond Spencer, who's up in Alaska. Um, he pre-ordered the Kindle version, got it on the 17th because I made it available a day early,
Mhm.
and had it read by the 18th when the print version
Wow.
was available. I know. He he messaged me and was like, I'm done. And I went, what? And it was crazy. And I especially have to call him out because he is without a doubt, I mean, Mythalis and Pyramid
Really?
are
Okay.
both based on a lot of the early fan fiction that he and I used to write. And I had his permission.
Mhm.
I've totally rewritten them in my own way,
Right.
but I kept the names. So I do have to give a little special shout out to my buddy Raymond up in Alaska, not only for being the first person to actually read the retail version of the Scar of Aimsire. Aimsire is the name,
Aimsire.
by the way. Um,
Aimsire.
but yeah, like Raymond is a very important person in my life, and so
For
yeah, I just
sure.
want to give him a shout out. So
Yeah, I remember you telling me about him
yeah,
before. And I think, but part of that, I mean, well, I mean, if it's Alaska, so if he's in the time where it's like day for 23 hours, it's probably pretty easy to read an entire book. But honestly, what it
maybe.
is it's the pacing. I mean, the pacing in these books is great. And whenever I've
Thank you.
done beta reading, because I've done it for a couple of different authors, the thing that I always go to is the most important thing is the characters. You have to make the characters interesting and people that you can invest in as a reader. But the pacing of the book is so important because if it drags too much, you're just going to take me out of it. I'm not going to want to go for that extra chapter. If it's too fast and things are happening at breakneck speed from point A to point B, it's too much. Like there is something to be said for that balance of pacing. But if I'm at the point where I'm hardly keeping my eyes open and you end the chapter in a way that I'm like, all right, I have to at least read the first page and find out how this resolves. Like I have to.
Right.
That says a lot about like that is the sign of great writing to me. You can
Thank
look
you.
at writing from a technical aspect of, well, you use this sentence structure or this pyramid paragraph structure, whatever it is, and that's all well and good. at the end of the day, do you have me hooked as a reader is all I care about.
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
you
I appreciate
absolutely do.
that. And I have no idea what a pyramid paragraph structure
I
is.
don't either. I might have even made that up. I don't know. But you know what
I
I mean? Like
yeah,
all these terms that like if you when people break down books and they're like, well, you know, this sentence structure or this mode of writing or you know all the strategies and things that you could learn in like a college for being a writer, like to me if you've got me hooked and you've got me wanting to just start the next chapter as soon as I'm done with one, because I'm one of those people that like I'll sit down and read a chapter and go, okay, I've got things to do, I'm going to read a chapter a day until I get through this book. If you've
right.
got me reading 8, 9, 10 chapters, you are a damn good writer.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And that happened many times.
Thank you. I
Many
appreciate
times.
that.
So
That's like the best compliment I could get because, like I said, I just want people to like it. You know,
yeah.
I just want people to resonate with it and enjoy it and
Hmm.
be entertained. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and so if there's anything I feel, um, it is I do feel a slight responsibility if people are paying $10. I want them to at least enjoy it. You know,
Sure.
so
Yeah.
it's not a lot of money, but it's still money that people earned. And if they're willing to, you know, take a chance on me with $10 for a book, then
Yeah.
I want to make sure they like it. I don't want them to read the first 4 or 5 chapters and go, yeah, this stinks. You
Well,
know?
but they'll stop. Like if they read the
Yeah.
first couple of chapters and they're not into it, they'll just stop. But I think to
Yeah.
me, it's more the time invested than the money. Money
Oh
comes
yeah.
and goes, but the
Yeah.
time is something you don't get back. And when you're
Yeah.
like, if I ask somebody to listen to a song or even an album, you're talking at the most like an hour, right?
Sure.
But a book could be days, weeks, a month. You know,
Yeah.
that's a big investment to ask somebody to do. So, yeah, the money's important, but for me, it would be the time. And I all I can say to
Yeah.
anyone listening to this podcast, if you are someone who's into this genre, into good storytelling, into you know epic battles in beautiful, amazing fantasy lands and love stories tied in and just you never know what's going to happen to these people next and plotting and scheming. I mean, everything that you can throw into this book is in there. And if you like that kind of stuff, if you like edge of your seat reading, then this series is the series for you. Check it out. Links are in the show notes, guys. It's right
Hmm.
there.
Thanks, Scott.
Click it.
Aimsire.
Aimsire. Man, Scott, thank you so much for coming back to the show. It is always a pleasure. You're gonna
Thank
have
you
to
for the
come.
invitation.
Yeah,
I
you're gonna have
appreciate
to
it.
come back when book three comes out,
Awesome.
and
I
four
will.
and five and nine and however many you end up doing. And
87.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. But I wish you the greatest of success. I mean,
Thank you.
when you know that I'm very honest with my feedback, as I tell
Yeah.
you, like, here's what I'm feeling with this. This is like whether
Yes.
you agree with it or not is fine. That's up to you. I'm going to point out anything that takes me out of the reading.
And you did do that. And I do appreciate that. And again, that's why there's only a couple people that are allowed into this space because
Yeah.
I don't want somebody telling me that it's good when it's not. And what I appreciate about you and Laurel and Ron is all three of you have called me out when something wasn't right. And I need that. I mean, every artist needs that,
Well,
right?
and only one of us is your offspring, and I'll let you choose who that is.
Well, she is, but I mean, she's my daughter and my firstborn, and
She's honest though.
she's not shy with her words.
Nope, not at all. I read
That's what
some
I
of
love
her
about her.
notes, and
I
I
raised her to
thought,
be fierce.
yeah, she was spot on in a
Yeah.
lot of. And I agree. I was really impressed with her feedback
Yeah.
actually.
She is
But I'll
amazing.
say this as a final note
Yeah.
is that the feedback that I gave you on the first book versus the
Hmm.
amount of feedback I gave you on the second book was day and night. You know, the first
Yeah.
book there was a lot of thoughts that I had, and again, it's like, you know, if you just take a look at it, if you agree, change it. If you don't, leave it. It's fine because it's your book. I'm just a
Yeah.
reader. But I felt like when it came to the second book, I'm like, I feel like I should be talking to you more, and I just didn't have anything to say because
Yeah.
you really grew a lot from book one to book two
Well,
as far as
thank
that
you.
initial, like you really took that feedback to heart, you assimilated it, and it became part of your writing style for book two.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about your lack of ego, that you're really working for a
Mm.
concern of the book being the best it can be as opposed to your book being the best it can be.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And what's funny, I'm not trying to, but Ron and Laurel have both said the same thing.
Hmm.
So I know that's genuine. And
Yeah.
I have tried to have some humility about this. Again, part of it is I mean, I say it sort of jokingly, but I'm not a trained writer. I just
Hmm.
decided to write. And
Yeah.
so I any critique I get from the people that I welcome it from, I'm gonna I'm gonna apply it.
Well, I
Um,
mean, same here.
just to get better. And
Yeah.
you've written a bunch of books yourself, and I knew
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And Laurel has written a bunch of books, and again, Ron has written hundreds. So
Yeah.
I
God, I
took
thought I
advice from
was
the
busy.
people.
He's putting me to shame.
Well, yeah, he's been doing it a lot longer than both of us. So
Well, but the thing is, like, I'm not a trained writer either. I
yeah,
read, I used to like to do creative writing exercises all throughout school from the time I was really young. I always enjoyed like writing stories and things like that. Those are my favorite assignments. But it's just something that it took a lot. I mean, it took 13 years for the Universal Court to come out from that first
yeah,
10-page screenplay I did to the final trilogy. And I can understand the trials that you went through, and I admire you pressing the button and saying, "Okay, I'm ready to put this out into the world," and then doing it again with book two, and you'll do it again with book three and book four and whatever. And
yeah.
it takes guts to do that, and don't let that go unnoticed.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, and I will.
Excellent. Well,
I
come
will.
back and see us again, folks.
Will do.
Check out the Scar of Aimsire. Aimsire.
Twins first, if you
Twins
haven't read it.
first. That's right. So, guys,
Twins lead.
I do have some cool stuff coming up on the show. I do have another interview that'll be coming up very soon. I've got the last two segments of Beethoven's Seventh Symphony as we move into movements 3 and 4 in separate episodes that will come to conclusion in early May. Got some other fun stuff coming up for you guys, including episode number 500. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening. Cheers.